Welcome to Straight Talk Vermont with Linda Joy Sullivan. Thank you, NEK-TV, for always hosting this show. Our featured guest today is Representative Jim Harrison from Rutland. And welcome, Jim. How are you today?
I'm fine. Thank you, Linda Joy. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So I'm really excited to have you on board. This is where we get it straight, so we don't have anything that's not straight talk. I know that you are in the House of Representatives. You've been there for a while. Had the pleasure of serving with you for many years. And if you would be so kind as to tell our audience what role you play now or how you got there, the committee you're on, the different committees and policy committees, etc. I greatly appreciate that. A little bit of background about you, please, sir.
Sure. So, Linda Joy, yes, we did overlap our tenure at the State House. It was a pleasure to do that. I joined the legislature in 2017. Was actually appointed by the governor when my predecessor had to resign due to a Navy deployment. And I've run and been elected 4 times since then. So I'm now serving about 8.5 years. I've served on a couple different committees. For the last 5 years, I've served on the House Appropriations Committee, and I currently serve as vice chair of that committee. It's a lot of work, as you know, but it's also an interesting place to be because most bills actually make a stop through that committee because inevitably they have some type of spending involved. Even if it's just a study committee and some per diems, there's a cost, and it makes a stop through that committee. So interesting that we get to look at a lot of different issues. I can go a little bit more into the different dynamic when appropriate, but that's who I am. I joined the legislature after a kind of a long career with the representing retailers and grocers at the State House and doing other things for them as the director of the Vermont Retail and Grocers Association. So I sort of had my eyes open as to what I was getting into when I joined the legislature, and it's an interesting place in many respects for the work that's done and the people that serve there.
Well, I think it's fantastic that you're actually on appropriations. I mean, we have three money committees, yours being the expense side of the income
Right.
statement, with the ways and means being the revenue side, and of course, institutions handling the balance sheet. So it's very interesting how the dynamic works there. And you are now the vice chair, which is a powerful position. And it's an honor to have you there doing that and taking that role, because it's definitely not an easy role to take. And of course, everything becomes politicized, certain points in time, but it's good that there's the balance. And did you come in as the vice chair at the same time that Robin Shy came in as the chair, or did you come in a year after? Was it the simultaneous?
Yeah, no, it was the same. She was appointed chair this past year, and I was appointed vice chair. And I think one the prior chair, Diane Lamford, who served in the legislature for a number of years, um, did not return. She lost her reelection bid this past fall, and so we knew we were going to get a new chair. Robin had been serving as the vice chair the past biennium, so she was a logical choice. And then all due respect to Robin, she works hard. She can be pragmatic. And I think for the most part, she may disagree, but we get along. She probably wishes sometimes I wasn't next to her because I can be a thorn. But I think at the end of the day, we understand each other and we know we have a job to do, and we'll do our best to bridge those differences where we need to and get the job done.
Well, and I have never seen you not try to be an appropriate, say, for lack of a better word, mediator when it comes to issues, always trying to come to solutions to get the best for the people of Vermont. I've seen you work, and I'm proud that you were doing this type of work. So I know that both you and the chair issued a letter or a memo or a
Yeah,
statement recently on a problems that may be coming up due to cuts and intelligent issues that we should look at for solutions, looking back at programs that may be out of date, that, designated programs that may need to go away or not be funded or looked at again, redefined. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? I would think
sure.
the people in Vermont are very interested in hearing how you came about putting that together, what you and the chair decided to look at, and what the impact is going to be.
Yeah, Linda, we are very good at coming up with new ideas, new services, new programs. Many of them very worthy, and look to help Vermonters in one way or another. What we are not very good about is saying, okay, let's look at everything we do and come up to a priority. The size of our bucket is finite. It's not infinite. In the past, 4, 5, 6 years, Vermont has been very fortunate in that a lot of federal money came into the state. Revenues were increasing. The economy overall has been doing relatively well. And so it's been easy to add to our spending without needing to go back and say change income tax rates or what have you. That's not the environment that we're going to be in the coming months and perhaps coming years. We need to reprioritize. So, understanding when we look at the upcoming budget, yes, there is some revenue growth, very modest, 2.5%. 2.5% does not cover the increases in costs for existing programs and services. It does not cover, I mean, we have pension issues. 28% of the payroll is going to pension obligations from the past and the present. We all know about the challenges with healthcare costs. So that's going up more than 2.5%, certainly. So there's a lot of issues. So, unless we want to increase revenue, which I don't think the governor is going to be big on. And quite frankly, I'm not looking at that for my answer. We've got to figure out, do we cut everything just a little bit and then do nothing well? Or do we look at things and saying, you know what, this is really important and this is, yeah, nice to have, but we don't have to have. So I don't know what those answers are. Last session, just to give you some context, as um, each of the various policy committees look at all the programs and services that might be in their human services, healthcare, you name it. They all have different agencies, departments, programs that they sort of are responsible for overseeing. We had and then they put a letter together to the budget committee, and they say, yeah, okay, the governor's recommended budget in this area was appropriate, not appropriate, and then they go into a wish list. We had about $300 million in requests over and above the governor's recommended budget. And that's typical. And no surprise, every one of them, maybe not every one of them, most of them said at the side, high priority. Some were very high priority. So that was all fine and good. Most of those we said we can't do. We did a few, but most of them we can't do because every dollar you add, you got to subtract it somewhere else. We're not like Washington. We can't print money. We could borrow money, but there's limits to what we can do there. So, um, what we need to tell the committees and ask the committees is don't give us your wish list. Look at your programs and say, okay, we don't need to do this anymore so that we can afford to do the ones that are really important. Otherwise, we're just going to have, we're going to put the brakes on a lot of things and no one will do a good job. So that's where we are. We have some huge issues coming down the pike. The federal funding's not going to be what it used to be. It won't take effect immediately, but there are changes. We get from Washington $1.5 billion for our Medicaid program. So a small adjustment to that means real money to Vermont. And we need to look at that and say, okay, is providing someone's health care, is that more important than a farm to plate issue? I'm not making a judgment here one way or another, but we have to ask
Of course.
ourselves what's more important? Is it more important to make sure that people have health care, or is it more important to subsidize electric vehicles? You pick the issue. All are important in one way or another, but what's the most important? And we have to ask ourselves as a committee, and we're asking other committees to start those conversations because none of them are easy. They're all well intended and have purpose. So I don't know if that helps you, give you some background. So we're just trying to say, hey, you know, don't be coming to us with a wish list unless you're willing to, come to us and saying, reduce an equal or larger amount of spending elsewhere.
No, I agree with you 100%. I mean, these are not easy questions. These are not easy tasks at all. However, you need to, I mean, you're charged with going out there and saying, what is the real priority of the day? And it's not easy to cut, but you're either going to raise revenue or you're going to cut, right? Those are your two choices, correct?
Sure.
And so the bottom line right now, the way I see it and this is just my own opinion, you need to cut. I mean, I think for years I kind of took that position when I was in the legislature. You have to cut instead of revenue generation. But you have the governor right now who I think is of the same mindset, not to just cut randomly, but to really analyze it. I mean, I don't think anybody's going into this and saying, okay, let's take the top 10 that we come up with first and just cut. That's the people are looking at it. You've had economists give you some input, and I'm sure you will continue to have the input from the state economists. And you have a great financial background yourself, which is very important. So have you spoken to the administration yet on what their thoughts are on the areas that need to be cut possibly, or has that conversation not begun?
No, I mean, I think we've had some roundabout conversations. They just sent out recently their budget letters to the various departments and agencies, asking them to work up a budget. They have asked departments to keep the total level of spending to 3%, which is not new, but 3% covering higher pension costs, higher healthcare costs, the pay increases from last year, which I don't remember offhand, but it might have been in the neighborhood of 5% when you figure the average increases. So that 3% in and by itself is going to put pressure on departments and agencies to look for ways to reduce. They can't keep the status quo and make a three and meet the 3% target. So that conversation, and then last week we had a joint fiscal committee meeting, which is 5 House members, 5 Senate members. We have certain responsibilities of approving grants, and last week, one of the things we had to do was actually approve a rescission to the transportation budget that you might have read about. Um, it was
I
about
did.
$7 million, and it was necessitated because the revenue for the transportation fund is actually projected to go down a little bit this coming year. The budget was based on a revenue forecast back in January, and in July that went down. So that necessitated a reduction. So we approved that rescission. That rescission included $2 million in personnel cuts for the Agency of Transportation. Which no one likes to do, but you have to pick and choose. What your objectives are to meet the bottom line. So we are fully cognizant. While we had an actually slight revenue upgrade for the general fund, which is personal income tax and other revenue items, it's not going up like it has been. So we've got to be cognizant of that. I don't think the governor is going to be proposing a lot of revenue increases, if any, because he and others, including myself, know we have an affordability issue, and there's only so much we can ask Vermonters to pay. So we've got to be cognizant. But yes, we did have some private conversations with saying, hey, help us by recommending some reductions in different areas that will help us meet the total. So whether they do or not, I think it's certainly on their agenda to look at those, and departments will be looking at those as they struggle to meet their 3% target or lower.
So, Jim, the governor has made some changes. There's some appointments going on, some in his cabinet, some in commissioner level outside of his cabinet, doing some shifting around and putting people, moving them from different areas within his administration. Do you think that that will have a big effect on how you all negotiate and work together, or do you think that it really won't have an impact?
No, I don't think it will have an impact. I commend the governor. He's got a good team. He's had a good team right along. I think as one legislator, I've always found a cooperative working relationship. We don't always agree, and they're
Well,
the
that's healthy. You don't want to always
yeah,
agree.
no, absolutely not. But I think, they're there to serve Vermonters and do the best they can with the resources they have. So, some personnel changes, reappointments are normal in any business, and they're certainly normal in government. Phil Scott's been governor, what, since 9 years now. So he's it's time to fine tune and make some changes as he needs to. And I people sometimes want to make changes.
Sure.
Look at Mike Smith. He's failed retirement how many times now. So he's been
That's right.
he's been in and out of the administration, but still there to serve Vermont as he is now with trying to help UVM Health Network.
That's right. That's right. It's fun to keep retiring, isn't it? It's like
We
retire on
yeah,
Monday, come back to work on Wednesday.
sure, exactly, yeah, yeah. So
But, that's an honor to those people. I mean, that just says that they came with the right heart, they came with the right background, their intent
sure,
was
right,
appropriate. And they should be called upon because you want to be able to rely on experienced foundational people. And you want to be able to bring in the new, but you also want to have those resources and you want them as consultants or you want them as collaborators or as partners or whatever it is because you could pick up the phone and you can get an outside analysis that from somebody who understands. And as you say and I say, you don't always have to agree, but boy, to hear their position, it's so valuable because then you weigh it and you always keep that in the back of your mind when you're making your own
sure,
decisions. At least I do. And I think it's respectful and I applaud the fact that we can keep pulling them out of retirement, at least for that phone
right.
call. So we've got some issues going on, and this may be something you would like to talk about or not, and I'm going to respect whatever you say here. We have housing issues, homelessness issues going on, and agreements, disagreements with how things are being used to find homelessness homes and temporary housing, etc. Um, and the winter's coming, and uh, there's been a lot of push down to go to, say, the municipality level, where municipalities should be taking some ownership here.
Sure.
Where are you with that? Are you comfortable with that? Have you been able to work with municipalities? Do you not even get involved with municipalities? Of course, I know you get involved with Rutland, but how does that work?
Well, we have a state level, state managed program for
Mhm.
homeless, and then we have regional, um, where there's might be shelters and whatnot, and it's sort of a state regional partnership. Could it be done better? Absolutely. We
Mhm.
um, Right or wrong, we went down the path of the hotel voucher program when the pandemic hit. There was a lot of things we didn't know. So we put, shelters, congregate shelters may not have been, the best answer. So we went into the hotel program and we have had a very, very difficult time politically to pull out and pull back on the hotel program. Um, I, and the reality is, if you look around the other states around us, they have shelter programs. They don't have, from what I can tell, hotel programs. So, would you rather stay in your own hotel room, or would you rather stay in a congregate shelter where you have a bunch of cots in the room? Of course, you'd rather stay in a hotel. So we have made it a better benefit than the surrounding areas. Some would argue that that's attracted some out of state um, people that are in that category to come to Vermont. Others would say that's the humane thing to do. So that's an ongoing issue and debate. But keep in mind, before the pandemic, we might have been spending 6, 7, maybe $8 million a year, and now we're spending north of 40 million a year, and that's actually down from where it was, a couple of years ago. But if we're going to talk about how do we balance the budget, how do we provide food security or health security, we can't do everything. So we've got to be cognizant of that, and we got to make some priorities. And um, you know, it's interesting to me, and no one wants to see people sleeping on the streets. I don't want them. No one else does. But sometimes it requires tough love and forcing people to find work. There is plenty of jobs out there still, and not just rely on the public benefit. And that sounds cold to some people, but sometimes, and I'm not talking people who are disabled or talking about people with young children, but sometimes you got to force people to take ownership of their own situation. And again, that is hard, easier said than done. And I commend the people who are working in social services and trying to help and trying to navigate all this to help their clients. It's not easy. It's really not easy.
You brought up a very good point. You said, we're talking about public benefits, et cetera, and how that's affected. When I was in the legislature with you and back then, we looked a lot at the benefits cliff. And I know we did, at least I know I focused a lot on that. And it's a difficult task and it's complex, but it was something that was being focused on. Then all of a sudden, and it might be my own lack of being able to find it, I don't think that's been focused on for a while as a top priority, or at least not publicized. Is there still work going on in analyzing the benefits cliff? And if so, which committees are doing that, or who's doing that, and
Yeah,
what's going
good
on there?
question. I don't have a good answer for you. Usually that's the
Okay.
purview of the Human Services Committee. I know they've been spending a lot of time trying to come up with a new program for homeless, which ended up being vetoed by the governor, I think, in part because it was actually projected to cost more than
Correct.
than the existing program. So but there has been conversations and discussions about that. I just don't know where it is. And it's something sometimes easier talked about than eat than solved. It's a challenge because sometimes you're intertwined with federal benefits, whether that be SNAP or programs like LIHEAP, with the help to fuel heating for the winter, health benefits. It's difficult sometimes to kind of come up with an easy fix to do all that, and then our own state, reach up benefits. So I don't know where the current
Yeah,
conversation.
that'll never be an
Yeah,
easy fix. I mean, the benefits cliff is just never going to be easy. I mean, you're looking at the individuals, everybody gets different programs. You're looking at the
sure,
cliff, the decision on whether, well, do I go to work? How long do I have to receive these benefits? I mean, these are hard calls to
sure,
make. Because you're dealing with human life, but you're also dealing with responsibility, a fiscal responsibility, and you're also trying to figure out how to get the human beings to be more productive human
right.
beings and go on their own and survive. And can they? And so I hear you. I know you definitely making some hard choices. We voted on things where it's like, oh, well, that legislator just doesn't like kids. No, they just don't like poor kids,
Yeah,
and so you get all the critics out there. And, we just have to bite the bullet, right? If you're an elected official, you bite the bullet and you deal with it, but you still have to make a responsible, conscionable choice because you have to be fiscally responsible, which is why I'm so intrigued about the committee you are on. If you wouldn't mind, does housing at all affect your committee?
well, the housing bills, because they usually involve money, do make it a stop through our committee, and we talk about it. We don't have the luxury with a lot of various bills of spending a lot of time on them. With last year when we were doing the budget, there was a housing bill, and I think we may have taken the money out of the housing bill, excuse me, so we could
Mhm.
talk about it in terms of the budget and then allocate, what we could to housing rather than hold up the bill, which had some other policy issues in it. And that's typical. Sometimes we do that, especially on the bigger items. We can't necessarily guarantee. The housing bill may have came to us with $100 million and asked for various, programs, whether it was the middle income, fix up program, or whether it was the conservation and housing and conservation board for affordable housing, you name it. There was a lot of money in there. And I think ended up taking all the money out of the bill so that we could um, deal with what we had at the end of the day. And we might have had 60 million that we could spend. The Senate spent a little more, and quite frankly, I don't remember where we ended up, but we could allocate it and have that conversation directly. So yeah, we do get involved. On right or wrong, money touches almost everything. Um,
Right.
so we
Yeah.
we do.
And to that, yeah. Jim, to that, your committee is distinct from the other committees. Like you're not always on the floor. You're out there working and then but you do come in for roll call votes, etc. Do you feel that there's a hindrance to you as a representative not being on the floor? Or are you finding that it's just your responsibility is every representative's responsibility to just be up on everything? How do you deal with that? Because that's a difficult task.
It is difficult. Sometimes I think, maybe it's by design. They really don't want us on the floor. So keep
Right,
keep them
right.
busy downstairs. But, kidding aside, I like being on the floor. You certainly get to know your colleagues better, um, you know, and certainly follow the debate. But having said that, we do have a job to do. And if we did spend more time on the floor, especially at the beginning of the session, we would lose valuable time to dig into or hear testimony from various department and agencies about what they're doing, what their budgets are, and trying to make informed decisions. So it is a little bit of a balancing act. And as I said earlier, one of the advantages that we have is that a lot of the bills do make a stop in our committee before they're voted on by the full House. So more often than not, we have we've seen the bill, so it's not a surprise to us. We've had a chance to hear from the policy committee about why the bill was introduced and what the committee vote was on it. We don't get to take all the different testimony that policy committees do, but we have a basic understanding of what the bill does before we say yes, let's spend $100,000 on X, Y, or Z. So it's a balancing act. The Senate, on the other hand, they only have 30 members. The Senate Appropriations Committee does not miss floor time. I mean, it would be very rare. They're there. There's 7 members. You don't take 7 members out of 30 when you're doing Senate floor business. So so they don't have that luxury of being able to say, you know what, we need to do committee time and hear testimony. I think in some respects they rely on the House side to do some of the digging and take more testimony. Hopefully, that helps with a combined, more effective or more in-depth look at the various budget items. But that's in the eyes of the beholder. Who knows what the right approach is? But
Well, that's good because I was going to ask you what the counterpart was in the Senate and what your committee's relationship was with the Senate, how you work together. Do you find it easier to work with one or two members of the committees, or do you feel ever have committee to committee meetings, and are those presented to the public? Could you give us a
Sure.
little bit about that working
Yeah,
relationship?
I think, for the most part, we do work independently, and that's okay. Just like we put together in the House a budget that's going to be a little different than the governor's budget. They're not, you know, they're not rubber stamps. So that's the process, and that's the way it should be. So, when we look at, we do our job, then the Senate goes on and takes it and they make changes to it. But we do have, I think, a good working relationship. I might talk to a couple individual Senate members on appropriations for the budget areas that they have is the same as I. What we do in a committee is, yes, we vote as a whole, but we break up all the different departments and agencies. And for example, my areas where I'm the primary person in the budget, include such things as public Department of Public Safety, includes the Department of Liquor and Lottery, it includes the E911 board, so and I have others, so we go through all that, and that gives us individually to get a little bit more in depth, and as well as, if any of our colleagues have questions, rather than 10 or 11 people calling the commissioner, one of us is doing that to get answers. So the Senate works very similar to that. The individual senators have different budget areas. So I might talk to the senator that has public safety. I says, "What are you looking at? This is how we looked at it," and but they come to different conclusions, and that's all fine and good. And that's why, inevitably, you have a conference committee with 3 House and 3 Senate members at the end to hash out those differences, and hopefully at the same time, even though they're not a member of that conference committees, to understand where the administration is, talk to them, and come up with a plan that at the end of the day gets the approval with the House, Senate, and the governor. So, and we did that this past year. So I'm pleased that we did. The process worked. It will be challenging again this coming year, but we'll deal with it.
How does your committee work with the flip side in the House, the revenue side, Ways and Means? One wanting to generate, the revenue, and one the expense side. So, what's the relationship there? Because that is a
Sure.
dynamic relationship.
Yeah. So, obviously, it depends on where leadership sees the whole spending package going, but typically, um, the chairs, talk, on a regular basis, certainly weekly, but more than that. And if we see, pick a number, if we see a budget of that's going to be $50 million more than the available revenue, and don't see any way around it. I'm not suggesting that's going to happen, but if that were the case, the chair of appropriations would signal to the chair of Ways and Means, we're going to need some new revenue, whether that's fees or something, and the Ways and Means Committee would try to come up with a revenue package to do that. It's much like, while we don't get involved with the education finance part of it, um, the education committee looks at the total money spent on education that the state's responsible for raising the revenue for. So the Ways and Means Committee takes that forecasted spending under the current system and comes up with a tax rate, basically through the yield bill, to meet that. Um, that's a little different because the current, as you know, education system, the each locality is deciding the spending. You put that all together, and then the state's responsible for raising the money, which again, a big part of it goes back through property taxes to the individuals in each locality. But in the terms of the state budget, it's the legislators that are deciding the total spending, and then it's the legislators that are going to decide how much they need to do for revenue. I mean, last year, modest, very modest, but we had about 14 or $15 million in revenue reductions. We couldn't have revenue reductions in terms of tax issues. That was a pension for military, veterans pensions, for most people is not going to be taxable in Vermont going forward. There was a slight increase in the income threshold that exempts from Social Security income taxes in Vermont on the Vermont side. Um, there was a large reduction. I say large, a large sum of money that was put aside to offset what otherwise would have been property taxes increase. Um, had we not done that in appropriations and lived without that revenue, um, then property taxes would have been much higher. So there is that communication back and forth so that Ways and Means knows what they need to do in Rob. It would be highly unusual for Ways and Means just saying, okay, we just want more revenue so you can spend more, and then increase taxes, and then appropriations could go ahead and spend it and recommend a higher spending plan. That could happen, but it would be unusual. Usually the leadership and the speaker kind of help manage that process.
So, what about TIFs? Does that affect your committee at all?
Uh, yeah,
I know it goes
yeah,
through Ways and
yeah.
Means,
It
but
does. It doesn't directly impact what we're doing. The education finance uh, piece or spending might make a stop in our committee, but that's really the purview of the Ways and Means Committee and any policy committee, like the TIFs in the case of Commerce, or the Housing General and Housing Committee will really look into that. So we're kind of bystanders on that issue. Obviously, we all got to vote at the end of the day, but the concern there is more, does it, the but for you're familiar with it.
oh
Is
yeah.
it going to decrease revenue, or is it revenue we wouldn't have actually seen had it not been for this project? So there's a lot of people very optimistic that this will help. That remains to be seen over the next few years if this will be a really good investment. We're hopeful it is because we all know that we need housing in all areas of the state.
And I know Rutland just got their TIF approved, and there's going to be a local vote, correct,
Yes,
on by the people, I
yes.
believe. All right, how is that looking? Is that's your district,
It's not.
correct? Still,
Yeah,
like
it's yeah.
now it's your district.
I represent Rutland 11, which is Chittenden,
Okay.
Mendon, Killington, which Killington did approve a TIF a couple years ago in Pittsfield. But Rutland City is going forward with a TIF, and they will have a vote. I think in October, and from different folks that I've talked to and different information that's been shared, my sense it will be positive. Rutland needs to do something downtown to revitalize it, and I think the TIF is, potentially going to be a good fit for it. Hopefully it'll be a win-win. Ultimately, we'll get more tax revenue for the education fund. And I don't, quite frankly, most people don't think that this project would have gotten built had it not been for the help with the TIF financing. So should be very positive.
Yeah, I think Vepsi did a really good job in vetting the Rutland project.
Yeah,
And that's kind of where it comes out, and it's up to them pretty
right.
much. Um, and I think that they focused on this particular district's application, and I think that Rutland has itself together enough to do that. Speaking of your district, you write the most informative newsletters, and I read them all the
No,
time.
I've been sort of
And
dormant on newsletters this summer,
uh,
so thank you for
exactly. So,
reminding
Mike,
me. God,
just want to let you know that my reading has gone down because you haven't been sending
yeah.
them out. But you do keep constituents updated on the bills. You do keep them informed. And your research or your positions are highly informative. And I was wondering if it's just your constituent base who can follow that, or if other people across the state could follow your writings and how they would do that.
Um, well, if they want to shoot me an email and get on my list, they're welcome to do that. Obviously, I started doing them during the session. I do a weekly update. Um, Now I email it only every 2 weeks. I try to make that a little bit more informative with other information, links to different articles and whatnot. But every week I do put a column in the Mountain Times, which is the weekly paper that comes out of Killington. And so that's available online. And that's also, um, I don't email that out, but that's certainly available to people. I might post it on my legislative Facebook page or something. But um, I I just feel it's important, and we all have different ways of communicating. I know when you were a state rep, Linda, that you used to do coffee hours, and you take each week you do a different town. So in a month you got through your district. I think that's a great way to stay in communication, let people have an opportunity to ask questions. Vermont's a very small state. Take our total population, we're no bigger than the city of Boston. And the advantage we have is that the districts are relatively small. I mean, geographically, yes, we're spread out. We're not in Burlington, we're not in Rutland City where you're, confined to a section of the city. I represented 4 towns. You probably had 4 or 5 when you were in the state house.
Yeah, I had 5 towns.
Yeah. Some in the Northeast Kingdom might have 8 or 10 towns, because they're even smaller. But relatively speaking, each district, unless it's a two-person district, represents about 4,300 residents. That's a manageable side that people have access. So whether it's those coffees that you did or whether it's my newsletter, try to keep people abreast of what's going on. It doesn't mean that we all agree with everything. I try to kind of write things in a third person, but the reality is my biases and and sometimes I need to explain how I look at it. So hopefully sometimes we can agree to disagree if we come at it from a different perspective. But that's why we have our system. We are the ones that are charged with taking the testimony, learning about an issue, and you need to vote accordingly, not on the whim of a poll of the day, because that's just not the way it works. And I think we're better served for that. So, thank you for asking about it. But if anybody wants to shoot me an email at jharrison@leg state.vt.us, I'm happy to add them. So,
See, aren't you glad that I just
sure.
clogged up your
Yeah, that's
email, your
fine.
legislative
That's
email? Anytime I can
yeah, yeah.
assist in. So tell me about the mix that's actually on the appropriations committee. Who is it? The speaker? who assigns
Sure.
everybody. I want the constituent base to understand the process. And is it a balanced mix from across the state, or is it heavy, say, in one district? How is it working out?
Yeah, good question. I think, and whether it's this speaker or past, I think they do their best to provide some sort of balance. Our committee is made up of 7 Democratic members and 4 Republican members. I haven't stopped to analyze whether that's exactly in proportion to what the numbers are on the House as a whole, but the majority party, if they stick together, can pass anything they want. But the political reality today is, I think they understand that on most bills, certainly important ones, we need to do it in a bipartisan fashion. So, because um, we have the governor's back as Republicans, but the governor got to have our back as House members too, if we really object to something. So, I think there's a growing recognition that that is important. But in terms of the committee, um, sure, we have some members that are conservative, and some members that are very liberal. We all get along. We start the mornings usually with a joke or a riddle. I think you need to have some of that human interaction. You need to be able to joke with one another. So I think the chemistry in the committee is good. Um, we come from different areas of the state. We have a member from Bennington. We have a member from Burlington, Middlebury, Morrisville, in my case, a little town of Chittenden, Putney, um, Franklin County up in, Richford or Enosburg. So it's collectively it's a mix. We have one from the Kingdom, Burke, and 10 other towns. So um, it's all good. It's at the end of the day, we got to figure out a way to work together. Doesn't mean we always agree, and some issues we won't, and we'll go on our way, and that's fine. On to the next. So we've had our share of partisan votes, um, and but this past session, we've had fewer of them because I think of the new political reality that a couple of years ago, the legislature passed a budget with overall spending increase that wasn't sustainable. The governor vetoed it. The legislature overrode that. That's not going to happen in this current biennium, period. So um, I think that makes for a healthier discussion and recognition that not one of us have all the answers.
Do issues of workforce development, the prison system, cross your committee at all? Especially public
Yeah.
safety parts of
Um,
that.
no, I mean, yes, we do have public safety issues. We don't, our involvement with corrections in institution is basically approving the budget that they put together. We don't. Um, they've gone through and made their, the pluses and minuses and priorities for the limited funds that they have to work with. But public safety laws issue are really more the purview of the Judiciary Committee. Um, we do get involved, obviously, and have been involved when the Judiciary Committee has recommended, increases in staffing for whether it's state's attorneys or judicial branch, and so we've tried to, be involved in that respect because we have to. I mean, that's part of the budget of dollars that we might have at our disposals that we need to work within. But
And wasn't there recent bills through judiciary that were discussed and maybe had amendments for some of the staff? Am I mistaken on that? Was there a recent bill through judiciary in the last session that
Uh,
affected the judicial system itself?
yeah, I mean,
Might not
there's
have
been
gone through you. Yeah.
yeah, no, there's been proposals to increase to judiciary, and we've added positions as best we can. It wasn't as much as what the folks in Judiciary Committee wanted, but we did the best we can in terms of the budgetary constraints. So yeah, it's a continual dialogue, and again, that's going to get back to priorities. And public safety is very important, but we all look at
Can
it
you talk
differently.
about that? Can you talk a little bit about public safety and about how it actually does hit your committee? I mean, we all know public safety in general, but what does
Sure.
that actually mean from your committee standpoint?
Well, I'll give you again. Public safety department is one of my areas. We have in a neighborhood of 50 or 55 vacant um, uniformed officers in the state police. Okay, out of 320 positions or so, that's a lot. Okay, now there's always going to be some vacancies and normal turnover, but historically that's high. And so, we have to do what we can to make sure that we're competitive. A couple of years ago, we included a little bit of money for, sign-on incentives and help with recruiting. We this past year, there was money included to bring the reclassifying the pay levels to make sure that they competitive salaries. So, we do what we can because you got to have the boots on the ground to enforce the laws. So if you don't, then you're just, it's the whole system. If you don't have prosecutors, you got a backlog of cases. If you don't have judges to deal with the various court cases, then that's a problem. Judiciary has also been looking at the Judiciary Committee has also been looking at, how can we combine some cases? You hear stories about, you got a certain number of offenders that, they're caught, they're released, and meanwhile, they'll build up, 30, 40 different offenses on them, and they're still out there creating more. I don't know all the ins and outs of that. That's why you have a committee that's supposed to look into those things. They have attempted to allow prosecutors the ability and like things like retail theft to combine them so that you can bring a bigger case against a repeat offender. I don't quite honestly know how successful that's been or if that's working. This past year, we expanded what's called the restorative justice program through the budget, which helps some cases, some offenders to go through a pretrial. I want to call it diversion, but it's an ability for some or lesser offenses to um, get on the path of restitution. Whether it's agreement with community service and whatnot, and avoid going through the long and expensive court process sometimes. So we have to look at this in a number of different areas, um, and hold people responsible, and that certainly does come down to resources. You know, People will say, justice delayed is justice denied, and there's some truth to that. If you know you're not going to be prosecuted, a couple of years down the road for a crime that you committed, it's not the same as you're going to end up in jail tomorrow if you're convicted. So um, hopefully it acts as more of a deterrent if you can have a speedy process. So
Thank you. So we're coming to the end. Is there, and I want to thank you so much for this informative interview. You have been, as always, so open and forthcoming, and I can't wait to get you back on here and wake you up one other morning. Is there anything you'd like to say to the state of Vermont before I say thank you again for joining me?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, Linda. I think at the end of the day, we're all Vermonters. Check your party label at the door, and just, that doesn't mean we're not going to look at things differently. We are. We all represent different areas, but we got to figure out ways to find compromise and do things to get the work that we need to do. And we also, in my view, we need to, I'm a strong believer, live within your means. Don't spend money you don't have. We can't do everything. Prioritize, prioritize, prioritize.
Well, I want to thank you, Representative Harrison, for joining me on Straight Talk Vermont, for telling it to us straight, and for the hard work you were doing on a very important committee. Thank
Great.
you, NEK-TV, and I will see you next week.